Hi guys, okay, yes, right, following on from all the excitement in RawTherapee on last week's video, today I'm going to, first of all, and most importantly, I'm going to show you a quick way to make a base preset for RawTherapee for whenever you bring a raw file into RawTherapee, into the development part of RawTherapee. It's going to apply a default processing profile that's not going to make any real visible difference to the image, but we are going to remove one or two background image faults by default, and then we're just going to have a look at how we can start to use RawTherapee's rather expansive noise reduction. We're going to do a quick process on an image, and we're going to just blast it off over into Photoshop and give it a final polish. I don't know how long this video is going to go on for, and I know you guys don't like long videos, but I'm sorry, that's just the way it is. So there you go, let's get the important stuff out the way. If you like this video, go and give it a thumbs up. Consider subscribing if you're not already subscribed. And if you are subscribed, go and click the old ringety-tingety bell at the side of the subscribe button to get a notification of the next time I put a video up. I could mention my Patreon members exclusive website, but this is all getting a bit old hat, isn't it? So I will shut up. A link to my Patreon site will be in the description below and on the end screen of this video. So we're going to start off over in the file browser of RawTherapee, and we're going to work on this shot of Brutus. It's sadly no longer with us. Great shame that, because he always provided the action. But what we're going to do is double click and bring him over into the develop module. Now you'll notice he looks a lot darker. Now, that's simply because in the file browser, what we're using to actually generate the thumbnail in the file browser, because there's been no processing done on it, we're actually looking at the, if you like, the embedded JPEG within the raw file. So that's that. Now then, the thing we need to do is to make a preset to speed up our workflow, because there's a number of little corrections that have nothing to do with exposure, nothing to do with contrast, nothing to do with colour, but they will make the image better. And they are common little alterations and changes that will equally apply to any raw file of any camera. So if we come down to this little icon in the bottom left hand corner, this is our preferences, and if we go to image processing, you can see here I've got it set to neutral. Okay, so what we're seeing is a straight demosaic in the default Amaze demosaic algorithm with nothing else. So this is as close to a raw file view as we can get, and common with most raw files where we've just used the standard metering on the camera, it always tends to err towards underexposure. And then because I've been in such a high contrast scenario, if you look at the details up here, I've actually got negative 1/3 EV dialed into this shot as well, because it worked for where I was shooting, but when Brutus suddenly came in, I had to whip round behind me, and of course the image is a little bit on the dark side. So there you go, I didn't have a chance to change my exposure settings. But, you know, I mean, it is what it is. So the adjustments that I want to make to this image, as I said, are common to all raw files that you will bring into RawTherapee. I don't want to actually make any adjustments under the exposure tab. None at all. I want to come over to the Details tab. I don't want to add any sharpening, any local contrast, any micro contrast, impulse noise reduction. Very, very useful thing, and we will use it later, but I don't want to add it at the minute. Noise reduction I do want to add, and defringe I want to add. So just with the defringe panel open, I'm just going to turn it on, and you won't see any difference to the image. But what it's going to do is a default defringe, rather like Lightroom does. When we come to noise reduction, this is a funny old thing, noise reduction in RawTherapee. Very, very, very comprehensive. But what you think of noise is more commonly referred to as luminance noise, which is sort of shot noise. But luminance noise, we don't want to add any luminance noise reduction. But what we do want to do is add the default automatic chrominance or color noise reduction. So what we want to do, because the luminance noise reduction is on a slider when it's controlled like this, because we can have it controlled on a curve, and we'll come to that later. But because it's on a slider, and the luminance slider and detail recovery slider are both set at 0, if I activate noise reduction, all I'm actually applying is the automatic global chrominance noise or color noise reduction. So under the details panel, we want to activate noise reduction and defringe. Over in the color management tab, I don't want to apply anything, just leave it on camera auto for white balance. I don't want to change anything down here apart from the output profile. And I'll put a link to a video that I made a while ago. I'll put that in the description below, and maybe a little info card at the top of where I get the Pro Photo ICC profile from, because we want to be able to take our RawTherapee images into Photoshop to actually do our localized adjustments and changes and corrections to the image. Now, I've already got that profile installed, and I've been emailing Ingo, who's on the dev team of RawTherapee. He's the guy who's responsible for the dual demosaicing and the capture sharpening, so nice one, Ingo. And I have made a suggestion to him that they make 1 or 2 changes to RawTherapee, including adding Pro Photo as a default bundled output profile. So I'm just going to change that output profile to Pro Photo, and I'm then going to just walk you through the advanced tab. We've got no Retinex, nothing active there, nothing in the crop, and when we come to the actual demosaicing panel, we've got demosaicing set to the default amaze, which isn't really suitable for this particular image. But if we were to put on a double demosaicing profile as a base adjustment, then it'd just take longer to actually do your other processing adjustments on top. So I suggest you leave it in amaze. We don't want to ever touch, and I mean this, ever touch, raw black points and raw white points. We just do not want to touch that. Chromatic aberration correction. We'll expand that, and we will tick auto correction. And to be quite honest with you guys and girls, that is all we need to do. If we then come up to the top right hand corner and see where we've got this 2 3/4 inch floppy drive icon there with a little down arrow on it, if you hover over it, it says save current profile. So what we'll do is we'll click there, and this will save to the automatic PP3. Your processing profile in Lightroom is stored as an XMP file. In RawTherapee, they're stored as PP3 files. So all we're going to do is, in the proper default PP3 profile path, which is me, library, application support, RawTherapee config profiles, all we're going to do is to save this as mybase.pp3. Now I've already got this saved as mybase.pp3, but I mean, you don't have to call it mybase, you can call it whatever you like, but I just prefer mybase. So I'm going to click save, and I'll get this little box comes up here that says mybase.pp3 file already exists. Do you want to overwrite? Yes. Alrighty. Now then, here's the next thing you need to do. Come back to the RawTherapee Preferences panel, come to Image Processing, and then where it says for raw photos, the default processing profile, which I've at the minute got set to neutral, I can now come and click and go to My Profiles and go to My Base. And if I now click OK, every raw file from any camera that I bring in to RawTherapee's development module will have automatic defringing, automatic noise reduction, automatic output color space switch to Pro Photo RGB, and raw color correction, or raw CA, chromatic aberration correction. Now then, there is another thing that I'm going to add to that My Base. And staying within the Demosaicing panel, we've got underneath raw black points, which I've told you never to touch, and I mean that most sincerely, don't ever touch it. We've got this pre-processing, low noise filter, green making the two green channels for the Bayer pattern filter equal. Green equilibrium that should be, I think. We don't want that. Yeah, and PDAF lines, PDAF lines, ooh, if your sensor's prone to pattern noise, that can come in quite handy, but we don't want that pre-processing. What we want is the one that sits underneath the white points pre-processing. And what we want is the hot pixel filter and the dead pixel filter. Now, hot pixels and dead pixels are faulty pixels, if you like, on your sensor. Dead pixels are dead all the time usually, but hot pixels can just be a little bit on the hyperactive side, and they can overflow, if you like, overexpose just quite randomly. So these two filters here actually identify hot pixels and dead pixels in your image and fill them in with the colour and tonality of their nearest neighbours. Yeah, how cool is that? Yes. Lightroom does do that up to a degree automatically, but it's not super efficient at it. So having activated those two options under the second pre-processing heading in the actual raw tab, what we can do now is go and click the save current profile and just go My Base and select mybase.pp3 and click save. And now we click yes to overwrite it, and now that default My Base pp3, which will be applied to every image that comes into RawTherapee from now on, will have all those options applied to it, which is why you need to do it you need to create this base profile on a completely unadjusted image that is totally neutral. All right, so there you go. Now if you follow along with that, that is my super top tip number one for RawTherapee. Make that My Base, or whatever you like to call it, default profile, and have it saved as the default processing profile for any raw file you bring into RawTherapee. Okay, without any further ado, let's go and quickly process this image up. So I'm going to bring it over into the exposure tab, and let's just go and get a standard curve. Okay, there it is. And let's just go and get the just above midtones, and let's lift them up and see what that does. That's a little bit too much. I want to keep that sky quite dark. Alright, rather like that. If I just come into the image at 100% and then sort of scoot along to here, I'm just looking at this very bright highlight on this coal fish that Brutus has nailed and ripped out of the water. do I actually need to actually give some highlight reconstruction to that? Maybe I do. We'll just actually take it into the colour propagation method, and we'll just add a little bit of highlight compression and see if it makes any difference. Yeah, it's just giving it a little bit of a darkening, not too much. I still want it to look like a wet highlight, but I don't want it going pure white, because then it'll look ridiculous if it goes on a print. If we come out to a fit to screen view, because it's only a fit to screen view where you'll actually get to evaluate the overall look and feel of the image. I don't want to white balance the image at all. And you can see I've got a dodgy horizon here, but I would much rather patch that in the likes of Photoshop than remove it by cropping the image. Let's go over to the Demosaicing tab, and we'll come into this at a 1:1 view, and then we're most likely going to go and take this up to a 200, 400% view. Oh, 300% view. That's plenty big enough for what we're going to do to this image. And first thing I'm going to do now, this has come off a D4. It's at 1600 ISO. I don't really want to use the Amaze Demosaicing algorithm. This is either going to be DCB or RCD. So I'm going to change this to RCD, have a quick look at it, and it's done. And I'm just going to apply the default level of capture sharpening. I can see the actual details looking quite nice, but I'm just thinking there's a little bit too much noise in the areas of low frequency detail. So having watched last week's video, which I hope you did do, you know what's coming next, don't you? We're going to drop from RCD to RCD plus VNG4, and we've just eased off on the noise in the background. Let's swing the contrast threshold of the demosaicing all the way to the left. So now there's the sort of semi-regular noise pattern that you can see in the background that RCD gives you. And let's just take this back up to the automatic mix by hitting the little checkbox there. And you can see automatically RawTherapee is analysing this image and saying it wants to use 15% RCD and the rest of it will be VNG4. I think actually I'm going to move it up to possibly 21, 22. And I'm just gaining a little bit more extra smoothness in this background, to my way of thinking anyway. So we've got the capture sharpening enabled. So what we'll do is we'll just quickly come out to a fit to screen view like that, and then we'll go and activate the sharpening mask. And so now you can see the sharpening mask. I'm going to reduce the sharpening on this guy by taking the sharpening mask up. Let's take it up to around about 20. There we go. So now we're removing a lot of this capture sharpening from the sky and from the dark areas of the bird. Okay, so we're now going to deactivate the sharpening mask. We're then going to come back in at 100%, and he's looking really around the head area. He's looking very, very good. However, let us now come in and have a look at the level of noise that we've got in the dark areas here. It's not looking too bad, but if I was to print this quite big, it's going to be a little bit noticeable. If I printed this at A2, it would be noticeable. So, just about. So what I'm going to do is come over into the details panel, and we're just going to explore, and this is going to be a very tentative exploration of noise reduction inside of RawTherapee. We're not going to go into it too deeply. The first thing is I want to leave it in the lab color space for noise reduction. So fundamentally the noise reduction is going to take place on the L channel. So we're not going to get any colour shifts. We could switch it into RGB, but I'm going to leave it in L. Now, as I said, because luminance is set to slider, and the slider value is 0, we're not getting any luminance noise reduction. However, if I change this to curve, woohoo! There you go. Did you see the image change? Let's go back. Slider. Noise. Curve. Little less noise. We've now got active luminance noise reduction because of this curve here. Now, don't ask me what these yellow and blue and red extending lines are for. I have yet to discover those. What the reasons for those are and how you're supposed to use them. Ingo, if you're listening, you know what to tell me next. But fundamentally, we've got a base level of noise reduction which is being decided by RawTherapee. And it is, if we look at the histogram or the grayscale along the bottom, this level is being applied from the highlights down to the absolute midtones. If you want that in 8-bit values, that will be a certain level of noise reduction being applied from 255 down to 128. And then from 128 all the way up to 0, it's ramping up in a smooth curve. What I'm actually going to do is drag this black point slider, if you like, or this maximum noise reduction, and I'm just going to move it all the way over to the left. So that means the noise reduction, which is governed by the upwards or the y-axis on this graph, the amount of noise reduction, whatever I set it to, with this point here, only going to apply to the absolute very, very dark blacks in the image, which there aren't any, not really. But I'm going to use my mouse for this because it's a little bit shaky when you do it with a pen tool. So we'll just get the mouse and we'll just lift this point up. Then what I'm going to do is get this low point noise reduction, and which is sort of on 128, 128, 128 if you like. And I'm going to move it to the left and I'm going to drop it down. So we're actually reducing the amount of noise reduction on 3/4 of the lighter tones in the image. So if I just come out to a 200% view, a bit like that, the noise reduction is increasing in these dark tones. It's only subtle. I just hope you can see it with video compression. But I'm actually using less noise reduction than default on the top or brightest 3/4 of all the tones in the image. And if I come out to a 1-to-1 view, you always got to ascertain what your image looks like at 100%. And it's not looking too bad at all. I don't think it is. Not too bad at all. Do I need to just go and have a look at this sharpening mask again? I think that sharpening mask's looking alright. I don't really want to take any more sharpening off this sort of grey sky, because I just like it being a little tiny bit granular because it matches up with the subject better. When you do noise reduction, so many people tend to be too heavy-handed with noise reduction, and it in effect makes your image look like it's made from plastic. So you've just got to be a little bit on the careful side. Now then, I'm going to come into a higher degree of magnification, and we'll just scoot across here. And where am I going to look? Somewhere in these grey areas, possibly. There we go. There's one. Can you see that? That little single pixel there, if I blow it up again. that one there, and we've got one or two down here. They're just random darker pixels, which are neither hot pixels nor dead pixels. And you'll see them scattered through the image, and you see them scattered through the image in Lightroom as well, if you look close enough. And, you know, I mean, a lot of people do accuse me of being a pixel peeper, but, well, there you go. We want our images to look as good as they possibly can, don't we? Now, if you remember back when I was talking about how to set up the mybase.pp3 default processing profile, I did mention this little baby up here, didn't I? Impulse Noise Reduction. Impulse Noise Reduction is quite good because it gets rid of what we refer to as salt and pepper noise. This is salt and pepper noise. In point of fact, it's not salt, it's pepper, because pepper generally looks dark and salt is usually white. So when you get the odd random pixel that's white, that's salt, and that's dark, that's pepper. And sometimes you can get them all mixed up together. This image isn't too bad, but in our field of view at the minute, we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Yeah, I mean, you probably count about 30 in this actual screen view. Watch what happens when I go and turn Impulse Noise Reduction on. Oh! And they just disappear. And they disappear from all across the image. So you might think it'd be a good idea to turn it on and have it active all the time. Do you actually need to have it active all the time? All depends, I suppose, on what you're photographing and what you're photographing it with. But I tend to find I generate more salt and pepper noise on lower megapixel count cameras that are running at a higher ISO. Alright, for any particular picture. So it's not a fault of the camera, they won't be there all the time, but just quite commonly you will find you get salt and pepper noise. So that's the simple way to remove salt and pepper noise. But I personally wouldn't add it to a default processing profile, because when you shoot a base ISO landscape in normal lighting conditions, there won't be any salt and pepper noise. I wouldn't expect to see any anyway. But there you go. So, come out to a fit to screen view again. Are we liking what we're seeing with the image so far? I'm okay with that. What I will do though is just come in and blow that area up again, that very dark sort of poor distinction area here, and I'm going to switch from lab conservative to lab aggressive. And now you can see how much noise we've effectively moved or removed from that image. We'll just switch back conservative, aggressive. Can we control this aggressive noise reduction? Yes, of course we can, because all we need to do is to bring the level of noise reduction down. And you see, now we're easing back to a little bit more noise in that dark area, because, as I said, you can't afford to make your image look like blooming plastic. But I think what we've got to do, if I just switch from aggressive back to conservative, and I look at this feather detail on Brutus's chest here, I'm seeing a softening when I switch back from conservative to aggressive in this area here. Let's just pull that over there so we can see his head. If I go to aggressive, I'm seeing a noticeable difference. No, not really. Let's do it again. Conservative, aggressive. We're not seeing any difference. This little curve here is actually controlling the aggressiveness of that noise reduction between our light areas and our very, very dark areas. And I really do think I've got that dialed in quite well. Now, there's other things we can do, but I don't want this video to go on any longer than it already has done. and I just want to try and ease you in to some of the things you can do inside of RawTherapee. So I'm quite liking that. I just think I'm going to negate the risk of putting too much smoothing on in the darker part of the legs just by inching this low point of the curve back to the left, making the cut-off point for the aggressive noise reduction start just that little bit further down the tonal scale. So there you go. I quite like that. Now then, if I come back to a one-to-one view, let us now, because we've got capture sharpening enabled, let's just go and activate the default sharpening level. That's down to 13. Let's just go and activate the sharpening mask. Now we've made those few subtle changes to the noise reduction, especially because it's now at an aggressive level but it's a bit more constrained. Do we actually need to take as much sharpening off the body of the image as we had before? No, not really. So that's why I've turned it back down to its automatic default setting. If we go back to how it was set before, we got it at 20 and the sky was getting no sharpening, but don't forget it's getting a somewhat aggressive mix of lab noise reduction on the actual L channel. So it is, as I said in the video last week, you've got to use noise reduction in balance with demosaicing and in balance with capture sharpening. I actually think that we will bring this down. What was it, 13 on auto? I think it drops to 13. Yeah, 13. I think I'm just going to take it up to 14 and that'll do. So we are sharp. Can we extract any more sharpness from this image? Let's just try going back to the details panel, open up the sharpening. Now this is post capture sharpening, so this is sharpening round 2. Let's go and activate it. Keeping it in unsharp mask, we don't want to be using RLD convolution, which don't forget that's the option we've got here. We don't want to be using that. Unsharp mask, we can definitely see it's working. I want to turn it down somewhat, probably get it down to 100. I'm going to remove it from the darkest tones of the image by dragging this extreme left slider to the right. I'm also going to remove it from the brightest highlights by dragging the bottom right slider to the left, just to clear the highlight tones. But then, you see how we've got this nice gentle ramp up to the upper mid-tones, but we've got this quite steep ramp between darks and dark mid-tones. I'm going to hold the shift key down and I'm just going to even the gradient out just a little bit more from the darks that are being sharpened just up to the bottom end of the mid-tones that are getting the full amount of sharpening. So if I turn the sharpening off, you can see it's quite subtle when I turn it back on. Let's just take it back up to its default amount of 200. It's a little bit aggressive, but let's just try activating the halo control. And that's done quite a good job. So if we take it out to a one-to-one view, there we go. Now I want to just add a little bit of brightness to contour the head of Brutus in this shot. Trying to do this in a raw processor, it's just a complete and utter waste of time. It really is. And I don't really want, from a personal standpoint, I don't really want to see the dev team at RawTherapee make RawTherapee go like Lightroom and trying to make you use it as an all-in-one, because there is no need. We've all got access to Photoshop unless you really do not want to spend any money, in which case I suggest you go and try GIMP, but you'll never get me putting GIMP on my machine. Might be famous last words those, but right at this minute that's how I feel, because I'm so used to Photoshop. It's the king of raster image processors. So if I go down to my little icon down here at the bottom that looks like an artist's palette and a paintbrush, yeah, and I click it, what it's going to do is it's going to send this image over to Photoshop as it is, fully processed, and here's Photoshop opening up. Ta-da! And you'll notice, because we've got Pro Photo installed as a output profile, we don't get any profile mismatches or profile mismatch warnings and conversion warnings when the image comes into Photoshop. So now we've got as seamless an integration between RawTherapee and Photoshop as we had with Lightroom and Photoshop. Yay! All I want to do to this image is really, really simple. I'm going to come to the Channels panel. I'm going to Command or Control click on the Composite RGB. I'm going to come back to Layers. I'm going to go Command J to jump that selection that I've just made onto a new layer. And here it is. You can see it. Turn that background layer back on. Come to the blend mode for the new layer and stick it in the screen blend mode. Woohoo! Yeah. Off, on, off, on. First thing I'm going to do is just drop that to around about 70-75%, something like that. I'm going to hold the Alt key down, Alt or Option key, and add a black mask by clicking the masking icon down at the bottom of the Layers panel. And then all we're going to do, Command plus plus, hit B for our brush tool, painting with white, 45% opacity, 60% flow, painting with a white brush in the black layer mask. And so what we can now do is just start to sculpt a bit of brightness in there. Knickers to it. I'm going to turn that all the way up to 100% so you can see what I'm doing. Turn it off, turn it on, turn it off, turn it on. Let's just run down there and just on that leading edge of the wing, maybe come in with a smaller brush and just lift up the brightness in the feet, on the side of the fish's gill cover, little bit on the flank, little bit in there. Turn it off, turn it on. If you think it's a little bit too aggressive, just turn the opacity down a little bit more. Turn it off, turn it on, turn it off, turn it on. Yay! Off, on, off, on. Simple. RawTherapee in conjunction with Photoshop. Superb. And of course, don't forget, all that lot's been brought about by noise reduction. Careful use of a mix of noise reduction, capture sharpening, and dual demosaicing. And just getting a nice balance between those three. So, all I'm going to do now in Photoshop is to possibly screw that image up. We'll just come into a 100% view and we'll just scroll across. Need to come out a little bit. Go and get the lasso tool, and I'm just going to lasso, staying in the lighter, more diffused areas, just around that sliver out of that corner. And we're just going to go Edit, Content Aware Fill. Could not fill because there's not enough source pixels in the selected layer. Yes, nobody reminded me that it was in the layer mask for the screen blend mode, did you? No, you didn't. So let's just flip down to that background layer. Edit, Content Aware Fill. You can't expect me to be blooming perfect if I'm not going to get any audience feedback. Come on. Now that's looking a bit leery, but it's not looking too bad. Let's just, don't want to minimise that. Let's minimise this. Don't want to be taking any sampling out the eagle, so we'll just remove those green sampling areas, rather like that. Let's just wait for it to toggle up over here. That looks a little bit better. Wait for the little whirly gigs to stop, and we'll just click OK. select, deselect, and there we go. So now we've sort of sorted our image out, that bottom corner there. If we go into the corner at 100%, there you go. Looks relatively believable. I might want to come in and make a few changes in here and maybe use the spot healing brush just to take one or two of these bloody droplets out of that corner. Otherwise they look a little bit repetitive, but it doesn't matter leaving the odd one in. So there we go. Let's just take that one out there. Yeah, go on, go away. There we go. Job sorted. Hope you enjoyed that, guys and gals. And I know we finished off with a bit of Photoshop, but we can only do that easily and simply in Photoshop if we've got a damn good image to start off with. And that good, sharp image with no halos whatsoever. I mean, come on. Where's the halo? Yeah? There isn't one. No matter how hard we blow this image up. And that is solely down to that careful balance of noise reduction, capture sharpening, and demosaicing, and our initial process of the image inside RawTherapee. So, thank you, RawTherapee. Thanks, Ingo. Yay! Okay, guys and girls, hope you enjoyed that. Hope you found it useful. And until the next time, look after yourself, stay safe, stay well, and I'll see you very soon. Tooroo!